The scorching summer sun beat down on the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Josephine Porter clutched the mysterious letter in her trembling hands, knowing it contained words she couldn't comprehend, but somehow understanding they would change her life forever. The year was 1876, and at 22, Josephine had managed to survive in the unforgiving West despite the handicap she carried in silence. She'd developed clever ways to hide her inability to read, memorizing which goods were stored in which containers at the general store where she worked, recognizing coins by size rather than denomination, and avoiding situations where literacy was required. But this letter, delivered by the stage driver who'd mentioned it came from back east, couldn't be ignored or worked around with her usual tricks. The fancy paper and official-looking seal suggested importance, perhaps news of the family she'd left behind in Boston 5 years ago after her parents' deaths. Josephine stood frozen outside the general store, the afternoon crowd bustling around her, oblivious to her distress. She needed help, but admitting her secret meant risking her carefully constructed life. Pride had kept her silent for years, but necessity now demanded otherwise. That's when she spotted him, Lucas Kane, the new rancher who'd purchased the Lazy K spread outside town 3 months prior. Unlike the other cowhands who frequented Redemption Creek, Lucas carried himself with quiet dignity. He didn't drink to excess or cause trouble, and she'd noticed how he treated everyone, regardless of station, with respect. Lucas caught her staring and tipped his hat. Something about his gentle eyes gave her courage. Before she could reconsider, Josephine approached him, letter clutched to her chest. "Mr. Kane," she said softly. "Might I have a word with you, in private?" Lucas nodded, curious but respectful. "Of course, Miss Porter." They moved away from the busy boardwalk to the shade of an oak tree near the livery. Josephine's heart hammered against her ribs as she extended the letter. "I received this today, and I—" Her voice caught. Shame burned her cheeks as she forced herself to look into his eyes. "I can't read or write," she whispered. The cowboy smiled, not with mockery but with kindness that reached his eyes. "Then I'll teach you every word," he said simply. Josephine blinked in surprise. "Pardon." "I'd be happy to read this letter for you right now," Lucas clarified, "but I'm also offering to teach you to read and write yourself, if you'd like. You do that, for me." "But why?" Lucas shifted his weight, pushing back his hat slightly. "Everyone deserves the gift of words, Miss Porter. Besides, I was a schoolteacher back in Illinois before I came west." The revelation stunned her. This man with his calloused hands and sun-weathered face had once stood before a classroom of children. "You're surprised," he noted with a slight chuckle. You don't look like any schoolteacher I've ever known." "Life takes unexpected turns. Now, shall I read this for you?" Josephine nodded, suddenly remembering the letter. Lucas carefully broke the seal and unfolded the paper, his expression serious as his eyes scanned the words. "It's from a law firm in Boston," he explained. "Broderick and Sons. They're trying to locate you regarding the estate of your late uncle, Jonathan Porter. It appears he's passed away and left you something in his will." "Uncle Jonathan, but I barely knew him." Josephine frowned. "What did he leave me?" Lucas continued reading. "It doesn't specify, only that your presence is requested in Boston to settle the matter. There's funds enclosed for your travel." He checked the envelope and found a bank draft. "This is substantial, Miss Porter." $500 for your journey," Josephine gasped. It was more money than she'd see in 3 years of work. "I can't go to Boston," she said immediately. "I'd be exposed. A woman who can't read or write has no business in such affairs." Lucas considered this. "What if you learned before you went? Learned to read and write well enough for Boston society? That would take years." "Not necessarily. The letter says you have 3 months to respond before they'll consider you unreachable and distribute the inheritance differently." Josephine paced beneath the tree, dust clouding around her boots. 3 months isn't enough time. It could be with dedication and the right teacher. Lucas offered a reassuring smile. "I taught children much younger than you to read within months, but I'm not a child." I'm 22 and should have learned long ago. Age doesn't matter when it comes to learning, Miss Porter, only willingness. She stopped pacing. Why would you help me? Surely you have a ranch to run. I do, but I have good hands. I can spare an hour each evening. Josephine wanted to believe it was possible, but years of shame had built walls around her heart. People would talk if I visited your ranch every evening. Then I'll come to town. We could meet at the church. Pastor Williams wouldn't mind. Her mind raced with possibilities and fears. And what payment would you expect? I don't have much. Lucas's expression turned serious. No payment, Miss Porter. Consider it a neighborly courtesy. Something in his eyes told her he meant it, but Josephine had learned the hard way that kindness often came with hidden costs. Still, what choice did she have? Very well, Mr. Kane. When do we begin? Tonight, if you're available. 7 o'clock at the church, she nodded, her stomach fluttering with equal parts fear and anticipation. I'll be there. That evening, Josephine arrived at the small whitewashed church 10 minutes early, her nerves making her fingers tremble as she adjusted her simple blue dress. The letter was tucked safely in her pocket, a reminder of what was at stake. Lucas arrived precisely at 7, carrying a leather satchel. Pastor Williams had left the church open for them, a single lantern glowing on the front pew. Good evening, Miss Porter, Lucas greeted her, setting his satchel on the pew. I brought some materials I thought might help us. Mr. Kane. She nodded, suddenly feeling like that scared 6-year-old girl who'd been mocked by her classmates when she couldn't recite her letters. As if sensing her anxiety, Lucas spoke gently. Before we begin, would you mind telling me about your experience with reading? Did you ever attend school? Josephine sat stiffly on the pew. Briefly, in Boston. My parents sent me to a girls' academy when I was 6, but I struggled terribly. The teacher was impatient, the other girls cruel. After 3 months of daily humiliation, I refused to return. And your parents allowed that. They hired a tutor, but he was worse, rapping my knuckles with a ruler whenever I made mistakes, which was constantly. Eventually, they gave up, deciding a girl didn't need much education anyway. She swallowed hard. After they died of influenza, I came west with a family friend. I was 17, alone in the world and completely illiterate. Lucas's expression darkened. I'm sorry you experienced such cruelty in the name of education. That's not teaching, that's torture. His understanding loosened something tight in Josephine's chest. I've been ashamed my entire life. I've hidden it from everyone in Redemption Creek. There's no shame in not knowing something you were never properly taught, Lucas insisted, but there would be shame in refusing to learn when given the chance. He opened his satchel and removed a slate, a piece of chalk, and several books of increasing complexity. We'll start with letters, the building blocks of all written language. For the next hour, Lucas patiently introduced her to the alphabet, showing her how to form each letter and the sound it made. To Josephine's surprise, she remembered more than she thought. Some letters were familiar old enemies, while others felt like strangers. You're doing remarkably well, Lucas encouraged as she carefully traced an M on her slate. It feels childish, she admitted. Every skilled reader began exactly where you are now, he reminded her. Even Shakespeare had to learn his letters one by one. By the end of their first session, Josephine had reacquainted herself with the entire alphabet and could write her own name shakily, but legibly. Practice these letters before our next meeting, Lucas instructed, giving her a sheet of paper with the alphabet written clearly. Tomorrow night, same time, Josephine nodded, a small flame of accomplishment warming her chest. Thank you, Mr. Kane. I'll practice diligently. True to her word, Josephine spent every spare moment tracing letters. During quiet periods at the store, she'd practice forming them with her finger on the counter. At night, by candlelight in her small room behind the store, she filled pages with increasingly confident alphabets. Their lessons continued nightly. Lucas proved to be patient but demanding, challenging Josephine to push beyond her comfort. Within 2 weeks, she progressed from single letters to simple words. Cat, hat, sat, she read slowly from the children's primer Lucas had brought. Each correctly read word felt like a personal victory. "Excellent," Lucas praised. "Now try this sentence." He wrote on the slate, "The man had a red hat." Josephine stared at it, her confidence wavering. "The man had a—" She paused, struggling with the next word. "Sound it out," Lucas encouraged. "Remember how R and E work together." "R reread," she finally managed. "Read, the man had a red hat." The complete sentence brought a wide smile to her face. Lucas's answering smile made her heart flutter unexpectedly. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd begun noticing things about him, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was pleased with her progress, the gentle strength in his hands as he demonstrated proper pen holding, the patient timbre of his voice even when she struggled with the same word repeatedly. As April turned to May, their lessons expanded beyond the church. On Sundays after services, Lucas would invite Josephine for riding lessons on his ranch, combining her reading practice with the practical skill of horsemanship. "This is Daisy," he introduced her to a gentle chestnut mare. "She's patient with beginners." Josephine approached the horse cautiously. "I've never ridden before. We didn't keep horses in Boston, and stage travel is all I've known since coming west." "Every rancher's wife should know how to ride," Lucas said casually, then flushed. "I mean, out here in the territories, it's a useful skill for anyone." The awkward moment passed as Lucas helped her mount, his hands strong and supportive at her waist. The sensation lingered even after he stepped away. After her riding lesson, they sat beneath a cottonwood tree by the creek that ran through his property. Lucas had packed a small picnic and brought along a book of poetry. "Poetry seems advanced for someone still learning basic words," Josephine commented as he opened the leather-bound volume. "Sometimes beauty motivates better than practicality," Lucas replied. "Besides, hearing the rhythm of well-crafted language helps you understand how words flow together." He read Wordsworth and Whitman, his deep voice giving life to the verses. Josephine closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her, transported by their beauty and by the man reading them. When he finished, she opened her eyes to find him watching her intently. "What is it?" she asked. "You looked peaceful." "I don't think I've ever seen you without worry creasing your brow before." Josephine touched her forehead self-consciously. "I suppose I've spent most of my life afraid of being discovered. And now I'm afraid of failing, of disappointing you after all your effort." Lucas shook his head. "You could never disappoint me, Josephine. Your determination alone is inspiring." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sounded different in his voice, like something precious. As May progressed, their lessons continued, but the nature of their relationship was changing. Townspeople noticed their frequent meetings, and gossip inevitably followed. "Miss Porter and that rancher seem mighty friendly," Josephine overheard Mrs. Hollister tell her husband in the store one afternoon. "Meeting every evening at the church. Wonder what they're really up to." The comment stung. What they were up to was honorable work, her education. But Josephine couldn't explain without revealing her secret, and despite her progress, she wasn't ready for the entire town to know. That evening she arrived at the church distracted and quiet. "Is everything all right?" Lucas asked as she struggled through a simple paragraph. "People are talking," she admitted. "About us meeting every night." Lucas set down his chalk. "Does that bother you? Doesn't it bother you? Your reputation, my reputation is my concern," he interrupted gently. "And I see nothing shameful in helping a friend learn to read." Friend. The word both warmed and disappointed her. Over the past weeks, her feelings for Lucas had grown beyond friendship, beyond gratitude, but she'd never dare voice such thoughts. "Perhaps we should meet less frequently," she suggested, though the idea pained her. Lucas studied her face. "If that's what you want, but I'd rather suggest an alternative." "Which is, we continue our lessons, but openly, no more hiding in the church after hours. We could meet at the cafe or on my front porch where anyone passing can see there's nothing improper happening. But then everyone would know I can't read. Would that be so terrible? Many frontier folk never had the opportunity for education." Josephine considered this. The shame she'd carried for years seemed heavier now that she was beginning to escape it. Perhaps Lucas was right, perhaps openness was the next step in her journey. Very well, she agreed, but not the cafe. Your porch would be better. Less distractions. Lucas smiled, relief evident in his expression. Tomorrow, then, at 5, I'll have my housekeeper prepare supper for us afterward. The next evening, Josephine approached the Lazy K ranch house with trepidation. The whitewashed two-story home was modest by Eastern standards, but impressive for the territory, a testament to Lucas's success as a rancher. He greeted her on the porch, where he'd set up 2 comfortable chairs and a small table. Several books waited alongside paper and pencils. "Welcome to my home," he said warmly. For 2 hours they worked through increasingly complex passages. Josephine now recognized most common words on sight and could sound out unfamiliar ones with growing confidence. Lucas had moved her from children's primers to simple adult texts, a book about American history, and a collection of short stories. Mrs. Hobson, Lucas's housekeeper, brought lemonade midway through their lesson, her curious glances making Josephine self-conscious. "Don't mind her," Lucas said after the older woman returned to the house. "She's just surprised to see me with company. I don't entertain often. No callers from town. I'd have thought the eligible ladies of Redemption Creek would beat a path to your door." The words escaped before Josephine could censor them. Lucas chuckled. "There have been attempts. Mrs. Hobson has turned away more pie-bearing visitors than she cares to count. And none caught your interest." Josephine kept her tone light, though her heart pounded. Lucas set down his pencil, his expression turning serious. "My interests lie elsewhere." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Josephine looked away first, flustered by the intensity of his gaze. "Shall we continue?" she asked, pointing to the open book. Lucas nodded, but the atmosphere had changed. Throughout dinner, a delicious meal of roast chicken and fresh vegetables from Lucas's garden, their conversation flowed easily on every topic, except the one hovering unspoken between them. As the days grew longer and hotter, Josephine's reading improved dramatically. By mid-June, she could read simple newspaper articles and write basic letters. Lucas had taught her arithmetic as well, ensuring she could handle financial transactions with confidence. "You've made remarkable progress," he told her one evening as they sat on his porch, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. "At this rate, you'll be ready for Boston well before your deadline." The reminder of Boston brought a pang to Josephine's heart. Their lessons had purpose beyond the joy of learning. She was preparing to leave Redemption Creek, perhaps forever. "I've been thinking about that," she said slowly. "I'm not sure I want to go." Lucas turned to her, surprise evident in his expression. "But your inheritance, money isn't everything. My life is here now." She hesitated, then added softly, "The people I care about are here." Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, hope, perhaps. Josephine. Whatever he intended to say was interrupted by the approach of a rider. Both turned to see Sheriff Miller galloping toward the house, dust billowing behind him. Lucas stood, instantly alert. Something's wrong. The sheriff reined his horse to a stop. "Kane, got trouble in town, bank robbery in progress, need every man who can shoot." Lucas turned to Josephine, conflict evident in his face. "I have to go." "Of course," she said, rising quickly. "Be careful." He hesitated, then pulled her into a swift, fierce embrace. "Stay here with Mrs. Hobson, I'll be back." Before she could respond, he was striding toward the barn, calling for his horse to be saddled. The next few hours were the longest of Josephine's life. Mrs. Hobson tried to distract her with conversation and baking, but Josephine's mind remained fixed on Lucas, imagining terrible scenarios. Near midnight, hoofbeats announced his return. Josephine rushed onto the porch as Lucas dismounted slowly, favoring his left arm. "You're hurt," she cried, hurrying down the steps. "Just a graze," he assured her, though his shirt sleeve was soaked with blood. The robbers were caught. No one was killed, though old man Jenkins at the bank took a bad beating. Mrs. Hobson bustled out with medical supplies, and together the women cleaned and bandaged Lucas's wound. A bullet had indeed grazed his upper arm, leaving a nasty furrow that would scar but would heal cleanly. "You should stay here tonight," Lucas told Josephine after Mrs. Hobson had retired. "It's too late for you to ride back to town alone." She nodded, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. The spare bedroom was comfortable, but sleep eluded Josephine. The night's events had crystallized something in her mind. Life was uncertain, especially in the West. Waiting to speak one's heart was a luxury one might not always have. Morning found her in the kitchen, attempting to help Mrs. Hobson prepare breakfast despite the older woman's protests. Lucas appeared, arm bandaged but spirits high. "Good morning, ladies. Something smells wonderful." "Josephine insisted on making biscuits," Mrs. Hobson reported with a sniff, "though I told her guests needn't labor." "I wanted to be useful," Josephine explained. "Besides, cooking is one skill I do possess." Over breakfast, Lucas recounted more details of the previous night's excitement. The would-be robbers, a gang from Colorado, had been captured and were awaiting transport to the territorial court. "Sheriff says they'll likely hang for shooting Jenkins, even though he'll recover. Armed robbery and attempted murder carry the same sentence out here." Josephine shuddered. "Such harsh justice." "Frontier necessity," Lucas replied, though he looked troubled. "Though I sometimes wonder if we're too quick to condemn men who might be redeemed with education and opportunity." His words reminded Josephine of her own transformation through education. "Like you've done for me, given me opportunity through learning." Lucas smiled warmly. "You've done the hard work, I merely pointed the way." After breakfast, Lucas offered to drive Josephine back to town in his wagon. The morning was glorious, clear skies, wildflowers dotting the prairie, birds soaring overhead. "I meant what I said last night," Josephine said as they approached town. "About not wanting to go to Boston." Lucas glanced at her. "May I ask why? It's a considerable inheritance you'd be forsaking." Josephine gathered her courage. "Because I've found something more valuable here." "And what might that be?" "A future I want more than money, a life that feels right." She took a deep breath. "A person I can't imagine leaving behind." Lucas reined the horses to a stop just outside town. He turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable. "Josephine, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying these past months have changed me in ways far beyond learning to read. I'm saying I've fallen in love with my teacher." The words hung in the air between them, terrifying in their honesty. For one horrible moment, Lucas said nothing, and Josephine feared she'd misread everything. Then he reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I've been wanting to speak, but feared I was taking advantage of our situation," he confessed. "I fell in love with your determination first, then your spirit, then every other part of you. I don't want you to go to Boston either unless it's with me by your side." Joy bloomed in Josephine's chest. "Are you proposing, Mr. Kane?" "I'm suggesting we have much to discuss about our future," he replied with a smile. "But yes, if you'll have a former schoolteacher turned rancher, I'd be honored to call you my wife." Josephine leaned toward him, propriety forgotten in the happiness of the moment. "I accept on one condition." "Name it." "That you finish teaching me everything you promised, every word." Lucas laughed, pulling her closer. "That, my dear, will take a lifetime. Some words can't be taught from books. Like love," she whispered. "Especially love," he agreed, and sealed his promise with a kiss that spoke more eloquently than any written word ever could. They were married that August in the same church where their lessons had begun. Pastor Williams beamed as he pronounced them husband and wife, remarking during his sermon how fitting it was that a relationship founded on learning had blossomed into love. Josephine wore a simple white dress ordered from Denver, and Lucas a new black suit that made him look more like the schoolteacher he'd once been. The entire town attended, their initial gossip having transformed to wholehearted support once the true nature of those evening meetings became known. For their honeymoon, they did travel to Boston, Josephine confidently handling the business of her uncle's inheritance, which turned out to be not only money but also valuable shipping investments. With Lucas's guidance, she read every document carefully before signing, pride evident in her eyes with each successfully navigated legal hurdle. They returned to Redemption Creek wealthy enough to expand the Lazy K significantly, purchasing adjoining properties and establishing one of the territory's most prosperous cattle operations. Lucas built Josephine a proper library in their expanded home, filling it with books of every description. By Christmas of 1877, Josephine was not only reading novels independently, but had begun writing her own stories, tales of frontier life and second chances that she hoped to publish someday. "What are you working on?" Lucas asked one snowy evening, finding her at her desk in the library, pen moving swiftly across the paper. "A story about us," she admitted. "About a woman who couldn't read and the cowboy who taught her every word and in the process taught her the meaning of love." Lucas leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Does it have a happy ending?" Josephine smiled, resting her hand on her slightly rounded belly where their first child grew. "The happiest possible. A new chapter just beginning." Outside, snow fell softly on the Lazy K, covering the land in pristine white like a blank page waiting for more of their story to unfold, word by precious word, in the years to come.